The grand chamber of Velcara Prime Station floated in the darkness of space like a jewel made of glass and metal. Inside, representatives from 847 different species sat in their designated sections. Some breathed oxygen like humans did. Others required methane or ammonia atmospheres, sealed inside protective bubbles. The annual Cartography Summit had brought them all together, just as it had for the past 3 centuries. Jiho adjusted his translator earpiece and watched the presentations with growing curiosity. He had served as a human diplomat for 12 years now, attending countless meetings and conferences. This was his 3rd Cartography Summit, but something felt different this time. Something felt wrong. The Velcaran chairman stood at the center platform, his forearms gesturing at the holographic star map that floated above the assembly. The map showed thousands of star systems, trade routes marked in bright blue lines, territorial borders in various colors. Jiho had seen similar maps before, but he had never paid close attention to the edges. Now he did. And what he saw made no sense. Every map, regardless of which civilization had created it, stopped at the same place. The coordinates matched perfectly across all the presentations. They all ended at the border of human-controlled space. Beyond that invisible line, the maps showed nothing. No stars, no systems, no exploration data. Just blank space, as if the universe itself ended where humanity's territory began. Jiho raised his hand. The murmur of conversation in the chamber died down. Hundreds of eyes and other sensory organs turned toward him. The chairman's skin changed from blue to pale yellow, a sign of discomfort among Velcarans. "Ambassador Jiho," the chairman said, his voice translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. "Do you have a question?" "Yes, Chairman. I've noticed that all the maps end at human space. What lies beyond our borders? Surely other species have explored those regions." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the translation devices seemed to hold their breath. Jiho looked around the chamber and saw something he had never seen before in a diplomatic setting. Fear, pure, undisguised fear on faces that belonged to species who had mastered faster-than-light travel, who had built empires spanning hundreds of worlds, who had existed for millions of years. The chairman's skin turned almost white. "That region has been deemed unsuitable for exploration. We should move on to the next presentation." But Jiho did not move on. "Unsuitable how? Is it dangerous? Are there spatial anomalies? Resource scarcity?" A delegate from the insectoid Threllan species stood up, its chitinous body clicking softly. The human asks questions better left unasked. Some boundaries exist for good reasons. Another delegate, this one from a species Jiho didn't recognize, spoke in a harsh, grating voice. "Your people are young, human. You do not remember. Be grateful for that ignorance." The chairman struck his platform with one of his 4 hands, the sound echoing through the chamber. "This discussion is closed. We will proceed with the next item on our agenda." Jiho sat down, but his mind raced with questions. He had been shut down completely, and worse, he had seen genuine terror in the eyes of beings who feared very little. What could frighten the entire Galactic Council so thoroughly that they refused to even discuss it? Across the galaxy, on a dusty trading post called Nexus 7, a young woman named Sumin was having a very different kind of day. She ran a small merchant operation, trading in rare metals and exotic goods between human and alien markets. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid well, and she enjoyed the freedom of space. She was checking inventory in her ship's cargo hold when she heard a commotion outside. Running to the loading bay, she found a crowd gathered around a collapsed figure. It was a Threllan explorer, his exoskeleton cracked and leaking blue-green fluid. "Get back!" Sumin shouted, pushing through the crowd. She had basic medical training, enough to know this Threllan was dying. His breathing spiracles were barely moving, and his compound eyes had gone dim. She knelt beside him. "Don't move. I'm calling medical services." The Threllan's claw shot out and grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. "No ... no time. Must ... Must tell ... Tell me what?" "Save your strength." "Your people," the Threllan whispered, pulling her closer. His translator was broken, making his words come out in fragments. "You don't know. What you guard. The void beyond. Your borders. It watches. It waits." Sumin felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you talking about? What's beyond our borders? We charted it once. 70 ships. Only 3. 3 came back. Never again. Never." The Threllan's claw loosened. His eyes went completely dark. He was dead. Medical services arrived too late. They took the body away, asking Sumin routine questions about what happened. She answered automatically, her mind still replaying the Threllan's final words. What had he been trying to tell her? What did humans guard without knowing it? She spent the next 3 days investigating. The Threllan's name had been Vecker, and he had been part of an exploration guild. When she contacted them, they refused to speak about his final expedition. They refused so forcefully, with such obvious fear, that Sumin knew she had stumbled onto something significant. She started searching through old records, diving into archives that most people ignored. She found references to expeditions, all of them heading toward the space beyond human territory. And she found casualty reports. So many casualty reports. Ships that never returned. Crews that went mad. Entire fleets that simply vanished. All of them had one thing in common. They had all tried to cross into the region beyond human space. Meanwhile, Jiho was conducting his own investigation. He used his diplomatic clearance to access the Council's historical archives, searching through centuries of records. What he found disturbed him deeply. References to the dead zone. Mentions of the silence beyond the human wall. Ancient warnings about disturbing the balance. One document caught his attention. It was sealed with the highest level of security clearance, but Jiho had friends in the Council's data management department. With their help, he managed to read the first few lines before the system locked him out. By unanimous vote of all member species, it is hereby declared that the region designated as Sector 777 shall be quarantined indefinitely. No vessel shall cross the boundary marked by human territorial space. Any species attempting to breach this quarantine will be considered hostile to galactic security. This decree is absolute. May the void remain silent. The document was dated 273 years ago, right around the time humanity had made first contact with the Council. Jiho sat in his quarters, staring at those words. The Council hadn't welcomed humanity out of friendship or curiosity. They had been waiting for humans to arrive, waiting for them to settle in a specific region of space. But why? His console beeped. An incoming message, encrypted and anonymous. Jiho almost deleted it, but something made him open it instead. The message contained only coordinates and a single sentence. If you want the truth about why your borders are the galaxy's wall, come alone. At the same time, on Nexus 7, Sumin received an identical message. Different coordinates, but the same destination. A derelict space station at the edge of known space. Abandoned for centuries according to the navigation charts. Both Jiho and Sumin stared at their messages, knowing that following these coordinates would change everything. They could ignore the messages, return to their normal lives, forget the questions that burned in their minds. But they were human. And humans had never been good at leaving mysteries unsolved. Jiho booked passage on a transport heading toward the border. Sumin prepared her ship for a journey into the unknown, Neither of them knew about the other yet, but both were heading toward the same truth. The truth about why every map in the galaxy ended at human space. The truth about what lurked in the darkness beyond. The truth about why an entire galactic civilization lived in fear of a boundary they refused to name. The derelict station waited in the silence, holding secrets that would shake the foundations of everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the galaxy. The derelict station hung in space like a dead thing, its metal skin pitted and scarred from centuries of micrometeor impacts. Jiho's transport dropped him off at a safe distance, the pilot refusing to go any closer. The man's face had gone pale when he saw the coordinates, and he had muttered something about cursed places before hurrying back to his ship. Jiho used a small shuttle to cross the remaining distance. As he approached, he realized the station was massive, easily the size of a small moon. It had been built by the Vulcarans, judging by the architectural style, but it looked ancient. Much older than any Velcaran structure he had seen before. His shuttle docked at one of the main airlocks. The seals still worked, surprisingly. Emergency power kept minimal life support running in some sections. Jiho checked his suit's oxygen levels and stepped inside. The corridors were dark, except for the light from his helmet. Dust floated in the zero gravity, undisturbed for what must have been centuries. He pulled himself along, using the handholds built into the walls, following the directions that had been included in the anonymous message. He heard a sound. Ahead. Movement. His hand went to the small plasma pistol at his belt, standard diplomatic protection. But when he turned the corner, he found himself facing another human. The woman wore a light cargo suit and carried a much larger weapon than his pistol. She looked equally surprised to see him. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Ambassador Jiho, Galactic Council." "And you are?" "Sumin, merchant. You got the message too?" Jiho nodded. "The coordinates led here. Did yours say anything else?" "Just that I'd find answers about what's beyond human space." Sumin lowered her weapon slightly. "I've been here for 2 hours. Found something you need to see." They made their way deeper into the station together, trading stories about what had led them here. Jiho told her about the cartography summit and the Council's fearful reaction. Sumin told him about the dying Threllan explorer and her research into the lost expeditions. "Here," Sumin said, stopping at a sealed door. "This is the main research center. I managed to get partial power restored. The logs are still intact." The door slid open with a grinding sound. Inside was a laboratory filled with old equipment and data terminals. Sumin had already activated several of them. Holographic displays showed star charts, research notes, and something else. Video recordings. Jiho started reading through the logs while Sumin pulled up the videos. What they found made both of them go silent with horror. The station had been a research facility 300 years ago, before humanity had developed faster-than-light travel, before first contact. The logs showed that the galaxy had been much larger then. Hundreds of civilizations existed in what was now called the Dead Zone, the blank space beyond current human territory. They had all been destroyed in a matter of weeks. The video recordings showed the destruction. Entire star systems going dark. Distress signals cutting off mid-transmission. Evacuation fleets being torn apart by something the cameras couldn't quite capture. Energy beings, the reports called them. Entities that consumed not just matter, but space itself. The DEVOURERS.G who watched the recordings with growing dread. Wave after wave of these creatures swept through the galaxy, destroying everything in their path. Billions died. Entire species went extinct. The surviving civilizations fell back, retreating before the unstoppable tide, until the devourers reached a specific region of space. The region that humanity would later colonize. And then they stopped. The recordings showed it clearly. The devourers approached the boundary, moving with purpose and hunger. Then, as if hitting an invisible wall, they simply turned back. They retreated into the void beyond, leaving the survivors in shocked confusion. No one knew why. The research logs showed decades of study, trying to understand what had made the devourers retreat. Every theory failed. Every explanation proved wrong. The region wasn't special. It had no unusual properties, no natural defenses, nothing that should have stopped such powerful entities. But the devourers never crossed that line again. They waited in the darkness beyond, and the surviving civilizations rebuilt in the space they had left behind. Sumin found a recording marked Final Summary. It was from a Velcaran scientist named Yuna, apparently the head researcher of this facility. Yuna's hologram appeared in the center of the room. She looked exhausted, her skin a sickly gray color. "This will be my last entry. The Council has ordered this facility shut down. Our research is to be sealed and forgotten. They say it's too dangerous to continue studying the boundary, too dangerous to ask why the devourers stopped where they did." She paused, looking directly at the camera. "But I know why they're really shutting us down. The humans, the new species that developed faster than light travel last month. They've begun expanding into space. And do you know where they're settling? Right in the middle of the protected zone. The exact region the devourers refused to enter." Yuna's image flickered. "The Council is terrified. They held an emergency session 3 days ago. I wasn't invited, but I have my sources. The vote was unanimous. Humanity must be contained, kept within their current borders at all costs. Because if humans ever expand beyond that protected zone, the devourers might return." Jiho felt his blood run cold. "We're not being protected by the border restrictions," he said quietly. "The galaxy is being protected from what's beyond our space." Yuna's recording continued. "The Council believes humanity is the galaxy's shield, an unknowing barrier between civilization and the void. As long as humans stay where they are, the devourers remain dormant. But if humanity ever breaks free, if they ever cross that invisible line..." The recording cut off. Sumin tried to restore it, but the file was corrupted. They had heard enough anyway. 300 years, Sumin said, her voice shaking. 300 years of lies. They welcomed us to the galactic community, gave us trade agreements and cultural exchanges. And the whole time they were just keeping us penned in. Jiho was reading through more files, his diplomatic mind processing the implications. "Look at this. Every territorial dispute involving human expansion has been resolved in favor of restricting our borders. Every exploration license we've applied for into deep space has been denied. I thought it was just bureaucracy, but it was intentional. They've been managing us. Sumin's anger flared. "They've been using us. We're not members of their community. We're their wall, their shield." An alarm cut her off. Red lights began flashing throughout the facility. Jiho's suit computer beeped urgently. "Security forces," he said, checking the readings. "Council security. Multiple ships." They ran back toward Sumin's ship, pulling themselves through the corridors as fast as they could in zero gravity. Behind them, they could hear the sound of airlocks opening, heavy footsteps in magnetic boots. Shouts in various alien languages. Sumin reached her ship first and fired up the engines. Jiho dove through the airlock, just as weapons fire sparked off the hull. The ship lurched away from the station, Sumin pushing the engines to maximum. "They're coming after us," Jiho said, watching the sensors. 3 fast attack vessels. "Strap in," Sumin said grimly. "This is going to get rough." She sent the ship into a spinning dive, using the station's bulk as cover. The Council vessels fired, their weapons lighting up space. Sumin dodged and weaved, using every trick she had learned in years of outrunning pirates and customs inspectors. But the council ships were faster, better armed, and there were 3 of them. They were being herded away from any safe port, pushed toward the edges of civilized space. "We can't outrun them forever," Jiho said. "I know." Sumin made a decision. She changed course, heading toward the one place the council ships might not follow. The border. The edge of human space. The line that separated the known galaxy from the void beyond. The council vessels slowed, then stopped. They hovered at a safe distance, making no move to pursue further. Sumin's ship crossed into human territory, and the immediate danger passed. Jiho and Sumin looked at each other, the weight of what they had learned settling over them like a heavy blanket. They carried knowledge that could shatter everything. The truth about humanity's place in the galaxy. The truth about the Council's deception. The truth about what waited in the darkness beyond their borders. "What do we do now?" Sumin asked. Jiho thought about the Council, about the diplomats and representatives he had worked with for years. They had all known. Every single one of them had known what humanity really was to them. Not partners, not friends, just a living barrier between civilization and extinction. "We find out more," he said finally. "The recording mentioned the Devourers are still out there, waiting. We need to know what they are, why they stopped at human space, and what happens if that boundary ever fails." Sumin nodded. "I know a place we can go. A human military station near the border. If anyone knows more about what's really happening out here, it would be them." She set course for Taiwan Station, a military outpost that monitored the edges of human territory. Neither of them spoke much during the journey. They were both trying to process the enormity of what they had discovered. The galaxy's map ended at human space because humanity stood, unknowingly, between the light and something far worse. And the worst part was that no one had ever asked humanity if they wanted that. Responsibility. The question now was, what would happen when the truth came out? Taiwan Station orbited a barren planet at the edge of human-controlled space. It was a military installation, heavily armed and constantly watching the border. When Sumin's ship approached, they were scanned 3 times before being given permission to dock. Commander Hyunwoo met them at the airlock. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes, wearing a uniform that had seen better days. "Ambassador Jiho," he said, recognizing the diplomat immediately. "This is unexpected. And you brought a civilian. This is Sumin. She's a merchant, but she's also part of why we're here." Jiho looked around the docking bay. "We need to speak privately, Commander. What we have to say is classified. More than classified." Hyunwoo studied them for a long moment, then nodded. "Follow me." He led them through the station's corridors. Jiho noticed how many soldiers they passed, all of them armed and alert. This wasn't the relaxed atmosphere of a peaceful border station. This was a military base on high alert. They entered Hyunwoo's office, a small room with windows overlooking the endless dark of space. The commander sealed the door and activated a privacy field. "Whatever you're about to tell me," he said, "make it worth the security breach." Jiho and Sumin explained everything. The cartography summit, the dying Threllan explorer, the derelict research station, and Dr. Yuna's recordings, the Devourers, the truth about why the Council wanted humanity contained. Hyunwoo listened without interrupting. When they finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that shocked them both. "We know. You. What?" Sumin stared at him. "Human military command knows about the Devourers. We've known for 20 years. Hyunwoo moved to his desk and pulled up a series of files on his computer. "We've been fighting them. Or rather, fighting their scouts." He showed them attack reports, incident logs, weapons analysis, casualty lists. For 2 decades, strange vessels had been appearing from the void beyond human space. They came in small numbers, testing human defenses at different points along the border. The military destroyed them quietly, their victories never recorded in public databases, their losses explained away as training accidents or equipment failures. "We call it the Silent War," Hyunwoo said. "Only high-ranking officers know about it. The civilian government has been kept in the dark. We thought it was better that way to prevent panic." Ji-ho felt anger rising in his chest. Another group keeping secrets. Just like the council, we had our reasons. Hyunwoo pulled up a video file. "Watch this." The video showed a battle. A human destroyer engaging a vessel that looked like nothing Ji-ho had ever seen. It was organic and mechanical at the same time, its hull pulsing with energy that shifted between colors humans had no names for. The destroyer's weapons hit it, tearing chunks away, but the enemy ship kept coming until a direct hit from a plasma torpedo finally destroyed it. "That was 8 months ago," Hyunwoo said. "The wreckage is in our research bay. We've been studying it, trying to understand what we're fighting." He took them to the research section of the station. The facility was deep in the station's core, surrounded by multiple security checkpoints. Inside, they found scientists working on equipment and materials that looked alien and wrong. A woman in a lab coat approached them. "Commander, are these the visitors you mentioned?" "Yes, this is Admiral Mira, head of our Silent War division." Hyunwoo gestured to the scientist. "She's been coordinating our research efforts." Admiral Mira was shorter than Ji-ho expected, with sharp eyes and hands stained with some kind of chemical. She looked at Ji-ho and Semin with open curiosity. "So you found out about the council's secret? Took you long enough. Come, I'll show you what we've learned." She led them through the research bay, explaining as they walked. "These vessels appear periodically along our border. We've destroyed 43 of them in the past 2 decades. Each one is different, but they all share certain characteristics. They operate on physics that shouldn't be possible. Their materials exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. And they're getting more sophisticated." They stopped at a containment unit holding pieces of wreckage. The fragments seemed to shift and change, even as they watched, as if unable to decide what shape they wanted to be. "We've been reverse engineering their technology," Mira continued, "with limited success. But we've learned some important things. These aren't the Devourers themselves. They're scouts, probes, sent to test our defenses." "Test our defenses for what?" Sumin asked. "That's what we don't know." Myra pulled up a holographic display showing attack patterns over the years. "Look at this. The probes only appear when our ships approach certain coordinates near the border. They're not invading human space. They're preventing us from leaving it." Ji-ho studied the patterns. "They're enforcing the boundary. Keeping us in, just like they keep themselves out." "Exactly." Mira zoomed in on one section of the map. "But here's what really concerns us. The frequency of attacks has been increasing. 20 years ago, we saw maybe 2 or 3 probes per year. Last year, we encountered 17. This year, we're already at 24. She opened another file, this one marked with red warnings. And then there's Dr. Junho's findings. They were taken to another section of the research bay, where a tired-looking man was examining samples under advanced microscopes. Dr. Junho looked up as they approached, adjusting his glasses. "Ah, visitors. You're here about the organic components?" He didn't wait for an answer, launching into an explanation. "The probe vessels aren't purely mechanical. They have biological elements integrated into their structure. At first, we thought they were just using organic materials for construction. But it's more than that. Much more. He pulled up microscopic images on a large screen. The biological components are alive. Or they were alive once. They're cells from hundreds of different species, all merged together with the mechanical parts. And look at this. He zoomed in further. The cellular structure is evolving. Each new probe we capture shows more advanced integration between the organic and mechanical elements. What does that mean? Jiho asked. It means the devourers aren't entirely gone, Juno said quietly. They've changed. They've merged with technology, becoming something between organic and artificial life. And they're still evolving, still learning, still adapting. An alarm suddenly blared through the station. Red lights flashed. Haiyan Wu's communicator crackled to life. Commander, we have multiple contacts. 37 probe vessels appearing simultaneously at different points along the border. Haiyan Wu's face went pale. 37? At once? Yes, sir? This is unprecedented. They're coordinating. They rushed to the command center. The main screen showed human space and the border beyond. Red dots appeared all along the boundary, each one representing a probe vessel. As they watched, more appeared. 40, 50, 60. They're not attacking, one of the officers reported. Just ... waiting, all of them positioned exactly on the border. Myra studied the display with growing concern. This isn't a test anymore. This is a statement. They're showing us they can coordinate, that they're not just mindless machines. Jiho thought about everything they had learned. The devourers that had destroyed hundreds of civilizations. The mysterious barrier that had stopped them at human space. The probes that had been testing human defenses for 20 years. Something has changed, he said. The balance that kept them away for 300 years. Something is different now. As if in response to his words, all the probe vessels moved at once. Not toward human space, but away from it, retreating back into the void. In less than a minute, they were gone. The command center was silent. Everyone stared at the screen, trying to understand what had just happened. They're preparing for something, Mira said finally. Gathering information. Testing our response times. This was reconnaissance. Hyunwoo turned to Jiho and Sumin. You wanted to know the truth about what's beyond our borders? Now you know. We're not just the galaxy's shield. We're in an active conflict that's been going on for 20 years, and it's escalating. The question is, what do we do about it? Jiho thought about the Council and their 3 centuries of lies. He thought about the human government, kept in the dark by their own military. He thought about all the civilians living their lives without knowing they stood on the front line of an ancient war. We need to understand why, he said. Why does human space repel the devourers? What makes this region different? If we can answer that, maybe we can find a way to extend the protection, or weaponize it, or ... or... Sumin prompted. Or we need to prepare for the day when whatever keeps them out stops working. Mira nodded slowly. We've been trying to answer that question for 20 years. The only lead we have is an old colonial mission. A ship called the Taiguk disappeared 200 years ago while exploring a nebula near the border. Their last transmission mentioned finding something, but we never learned what. Where? Jiho asked. Myra pulled up coordinates. Here, right at the edge of what would become our territory. But it's in Council-monitored space now. Going there would be an act of war. Hyunwoo looked at the coordinates, then at his fellow officers, then at Jiho and Sumin. Then I guess we're about to commit treason. Because if those probes are gathering for an attack, we need every advantage we can get. And if that means finding out what the Taiguk discovered, then that's exactly what we're going to do. The stealth ship cut through space like a knife through water. Its hull covered in special coating that bent light and sensor waves around it. Hyunwoo piloted the vessel himself, his years of experience showing in every precise movement. Jiho and Sumin sat in the passenger section with Dr. Kyung, a brilliant but eccentric physicist who specialized in theories that the Council had labeled dangerous research. Kyung was young for someone of her expertise, barely 30, with hair she had dyed bright blue and a habit of talking to herself while working. She had joined the mission enthusiastically, calling it the most exciting thing to happen in her career. Dimensional frequency variances, she muttered, staring at her portable computer. That's what the old theory suggested. Each species' consciousness operates on slightly different quantum wavelengths, like radio stations on different channels. If the precursor civilization that fought the Devourers operated on a specific frequency, and if they built something to protect that frequency, you're saying the barrier is tuned to human brainwaves? Sumin asked. Not just brainwaves. The fundamental quantum signature of human neural patterns. Every species thinks differently at a quantum level. We know this from translation technology. But if humans happen to match the precursors... Kyung trailed off, returning to her calculations. Admiral Myra's voice came through the communication system. She had stayed behind at Taiwan Station to coordinate their support. You're approaching the nebula. Council sensors are tracking your general area, but they can't get a clear reading. You have maybe 6 hours before they send ships to investigate. Understood, Yunwoo replied. Beginning sweep for the Taigak. The nebula was beautiful, clouds of gas glowing in shades of purple and gold. But it also played havoc with their sensors. They spent 2 hours searching before Kyung's specialized equipment picked up something. There, she said, pointing at her screen. A ship and something else. Something big. The Taiguk floated in the heart of the nebula, perfectly preserved by the cold of space. It was an old colonial vessel, built in the early days of human space exploration. Hyunwoo brought the stealth ship alongside, and they suited up for boarding. A Taiguk's airlock still functioned. Inside, emergency lights cast everything in a dim red glow. The ship was silent, except for the hum of life support, which somehow still worked after 2 centuries. The crew, Jiho said, finding the first body. It was perfectly preserved in a cryogenic pod, along with dozens of others. They put themselves in suspension. Not all of them, Sumin called from the bridge. Look at this. The captain's log was still active on the main console. They played the last entry. A tired-looking man appeared on the screen, wearing an old-style captain's uniform. This is Captain Daeho of the Taiguk. We found it. The signal we've been following for 3 months. It's not natural. It's artificial, built by something ancient. Our scanners can barely understand what we're seeing. My science officer says it exists partially outside normal spacetime. The recording flickered. The structure is enormous. Crystal or metal, we can't tell. It's broadcasting on frequencies we shouldn't be able to detect, but we can. All of us, every human on this ship, can feel it in our heads, like a vibration at the edge of hearing. Daeho looked directly at the camera. We tried to approach it, but the field is too intense. Our equipment fails. Our bodies fail. 2 crew members died before we retreated. We've put the rest in cryosleep to protect them. I'm staying awake to maintain the ship and send this message. He paused. Whoever finds this, know that we found something important. Something that connects to humanity in ways we don't understand. The structure seems to recognize us. It responds to our presence. We think it's been waiting for us to find it. The recording ended. They found Daeho's body in the captain's chair, dead from old age. He had kept his promise, maintaining the ship until the end. The structure, Kyung said urgently. We need to find it. They used the Taiguk's sensor logs to locate the object. It hung in space like a frozen star, a massive crystalline structure that hurt to look at directly. Their instruments went haywire, trying to analyze it. Kyung's hands shook as she studied the readings. It's beautiful. It's impossible. It's generating a field that extends for light years in every direction. And look at the frequency signature. She showed them her analysis. The field operated on quantum wavelengths that matched human neural patterns almost perfectly. Not exact, but close enough. This is it, Jiho said. This is what keeps the Devourers out. This structure marks human space as protected territory. But why? Sumin asked. Why would something build this to protect us specifically? Kyung was running more scans, her excitement growing. It's not protecting us. Or not just us. Look at this. The structure is broadcasting a message. In mathematics, in physics, in universal constants. It's saying this space belongs to the inheritors. Inheritors of what? Of the precursor civilization. The ones who fought the Devourers billions of years ago. Kyung's fingers flew over her keyboard. The structure was built by them. A monument. A claim. A declaration that this region of space belongs to whoever matches their neural pattern. And we match. Dr. Junho's voice crackled over their communication link from the research ship following behind them. He had been analyzing the data they were transmitting. I'm seeing something else in those readings. The structure's power source. It's ancient. And it's failing. Kyung checked her instruments, her face going pale. He's right. The field is degrading. Slowly, but measurably. I'm running projections now. The silence in the ship was heavy as they waited. When Kyung looked up, her expression was grim. 6 months, she said. Maybe less. In 6 months, the barrier will collapse completely. And every devourer in the void will know human space is no longer protected. Jiho felt his heart sink. Can we repair it? Recharge it? The power source is exotic matter decay. We'd need energy equivalent to a supernova. And even if we had that much power, someone would need to guide the energy flow. The structure requires a conscious mind to direct the recharge process. A mind that would be dissolved into the crystalline matrix, becoming part of the defense system forever. They stared at the massive structure, trying to comprehend what they had learned. Humanity hadn't earned their protected status. They had inherited it from a civilization that had died fighting the Devourers billions of years ago. The precursors had left this structure behind, waiting for a species with matching neural patterns to find it. And now that protection was failing, Admiral Myra's voice interrupted their thoughts. We have a problem. Council forces detected our intrusion. A fleet is heading your way. 20 ships. You have maybe 30 minutes before they arrive. Hyun-woo started the stealth ship's engines. We need to go, now. But before they could move, a new alarm sounded. Not from their ship, but from the structure itself. The crystalline surface began to pulse with light, patterns flowing across it like water. It's responding to us, Kyung said, her voice filled with awe. To our presence. Just like Captain Daeho said, the structure sent a signal directly to their ship. Not in radio waves or laser pulses, but in something that bypassed their instruments entirely and appeared as thoughts. In their minds, images, memories, not their own. But from the precursors, they saw a civilization spanning thousands of worlds. They saw the Devourers emerging from spaces between dimensions. They saw a war that lasted millions of years. They saw the precursors making their final stand, uploading their consciousnesses into massive crystalline structures scattered across the galaxy, creating barriers that the Devourers could not cross. Most of those barriers had failed over the eons. This was one of the last the images faded. Kyung was crying, overwhelmed by what they had experienced. They sacrificed everything. Their entire civilization became the defense. Billions of minds, all merged into the structure, standing watch against the darkness. "And now we have to make the same choice," Geo said quietly. "Let the barrier fail and face the Devourers, or find a way to recharge it." "If we recharge it, someone dies," Sumin said. "Someone has to become part of the structure forever." Council ships appeared on their sensors. Hyunwoo engaged the engines. "We need to leave. We can figure out what to do once we're safe." They fled the nebula, the Council fleet in pursuit. But Jiho kept looking back at the structure, its crystalline surface still pulsing with faint light. In 6 months, that light would go out. And then humanity would have to face what their unknown protectors had been keeping at bay. They had inherited a legacy they never asked for. Now they had to decide if they were willing to pay the price to keep it. The Council Armada arrived at Human, space with guns charged and shields raised. 200 warships from a dozen different species, all demanding that humanity surrender Jiho and Sumin for their crimes against galactic security. The human government, finally learning the full truth about the Devourers and the barrier, refused. War came to the galaxy for the first time in 300 years, but it wasn't the war anyone expected. The Council didn't want to destroy humanity. They wanted to control them, to force humans back into their role as unknowing shields. The human military, led by Admiral Mira and Commander Hyunwoo, fought a defensive campaign, buying time while Dr. Kyung worked desperately on a solution. Jiho stood in the command center of Earth's orbital defense station, watching the battles unfold across dozens of screens. Ships engaged in combat near the border. Diplomatic channels burned with accusations and threats. And through it all, the countdown continued. 5 months until the barrier failed. Then 4. Then 3. "We're running out of time," Mara said, joining him at the observation window. "Even if we win this war, we lose. The Devourers won't care who controls human space when the barrier falls." "Kyung says she has a plan," Jiho replied. "She's been working with Dr. Junho and every physicist we have. They think there's a way to recharge the structure." At what cost? That was the question that haunted all of them. The structure required a conscious mind to guide the recharge process. One person would have to sacrifice themselves, becoming part of the crystalline matrix forever. Their individual identity would be lost, merged into the ancient defense system. Dozens of volunteers had stepped forward. Hyunwoo argued his tactical knowledge would make him the ideal guardian. Junho believed his understanding of the Devourer's biology was crucial. Even Sumin had volunteered, saying she could sense the structure's presence more clearly than others, that it called to her in dreams. But Kyung kept refusing all of them. She knew something she wasn't sharing. Jiho found her in the research laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays and quantum computers. She looked exhausted, her blue hair pulled back in a messy knot. "Tell me the truth," Jiho said. "What aren't you telling us about the recharge process?" Kyung didn't look up from her work. "One mind isn't enough." "What?" "The precursors didn't use one mind, Jiho. They used their entire civilization. Billions of consciousnesses, all merged together, creating an impenetrable network. One human mind, even enhanced with our best technology, won't be enough to sustain the barrier." Jiho felt his stomach drop. How many would we need? Millions. Maybe billions. Kyung finally looked at him, tears in her eyes. "We'd have to upload a significant portion of humanity's population into the structure. Create a collective consciousness, just like the precursors did. That's impossible. We can't ask people to give up their individual existence. We don't have to." Kyung pulled up a new set of calculations. "I've been working on something. A quantum entanglement network that would link human minds without destroying their individuality. They'd exist partially in the physical world and partially in the structure. Still themselves, but also part of something greater. She showed him the designs. It was revolutionary technology, built on theories that most scientists considered pure fantasy. But Kyung had made it work, using the exotic materials recovered from destroyed Devourer probes. The volunteers wouldn't lose themselves entirely, she explained. They'd still be able to communicate with their families, still experience the physical world through quantum links. But part of their consciousness would be merged into the defensive network, standing eternal watch against the Devourers. And you're sure this would work? I'm not sure of anything. This is all theoretical. We'd be the first species to attempt voluntary collective consciousness on this scale. Kyung smiled sadly. But it's the only chance we have. Ji-ho brought the proposal to Admiral Mira and the human government. The debate lasted for days. Some called it a violation of human autonomy. Others said it was humanity's destiny, the purpose they had been unknowingly preparing for since they first ventured into space. In the end, they made it voluntary. Every human would be given the choice. Join the collective consciousness and become part of humanity's eternal defense, or remain fully individual and trust in those who chose to volunteer. The response shocked everyone. Millions volunteered in the first week. Not just soldiers and scientists, but teachers, artists, parents, children. People from every nation, every culture, every walk of life. They understood what was at stake. Not just human survival, but the survival of every species in the galaxy. The Council's attack faltered when they learned what humanity was planning. Some species withdrew their ships, unwilling to fight people preparing for such sacrifice. Others intensified their assault, terrified of what a collective human consciousness might become. But Admiral Mira's forces held the line. Hyunwoo led desperate defense actions, buying time for the volunteers to be prepared. Sumin used her merchant contacts to smuggle resources past the blockade. And Ji-ho, using every diplomatic skill he possessed, convinced some council members that humanity's plan was the galaxy's only hope. The recharge process began with 2 months left before the barrier's collapse. The volunteers were taken to specially built facilities where Kyung's technology linked their minds to the quantum network. One by one, they joined the growing collective, their consciousnesses expanding to touch each other and the ancient structure light years away. Ji-ho visited the facilities and spoke with some of the volunteers before they underwent the process. A young mother told him she was doing this so her children could grow up in a safe galaxy. An elderly veteran said he had spent his life defending humanity, and this was just the final mission. A teenage student said she wanted to be part of something that mattered, something that would last forever. They were all so brave. So human. The day of the final recharge came too quickly. 10 million human minds had joined the network, their combined consciousness creating something unprecedented. They existed in 2 states simultaneously, still able to walk and talk and live in the physical world, but also merged into a vast awareness that spanned dimensions. The structure in the nebula blazed with new light as the human collective touched it for the first time. The exotic matter reserves that had been stockpiled were released, their energy channeled through the network under the guidance of 10 million minds working in perfect harmony. The recharge took 6 hours. Earth's population watched through every available screen as the barrier reignited, its protective field expanding and strengthening. The ancient crystalline structure, dark and dying, suddenly blazed like a newborn star. And then the Devourers came. They had been waiting, sensing the barrier's weakness. Now they surged forward from the void, expecting to find the protection gone and the galaxy defenseless. Instead, they crashed against a barrier stronger than any the precursors had created, because this barrier was different. It wasn't just passive defense. The human collective had brought something new to the ancient: structure, creativity, unpredictability, the stubborn human refusal to accept defeat. The barrier didn't just block the Devourers. It fought back. Ji-ho watched from Earth as the battle unfolded in dimensions he could barely perceive. The Devourers, entities of pure energy that consumed reality itself, met an opposition they hadn't faced in billions of years. A living, thinking defense that learned from every attack and adapted instantly. The Devourers retreated. For the first time since the Precursors fell, they didn't just stop at a boundary. They actively fled, pulling back into the spaces between dimensions, unwilling to face this new guardian. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if they would return. Days passed, then weeks. The Devourers didn't come back. They had tested humanity's defenses and found something that scared them. The Council formally surrendered 3 weeks later. They had no choice. Humanity now controlled the one thing that kept the entire galaxy safe. But the human government, advised by Ji-ho and others who had learned the truth, didn't seek revenge or dominance. They proposed a new galactic order, one built on truth instead of lies. The borders remained, but now by mutual agreement. Human space was still where the map ended, but the reason was no longer hidden. It ended there because that's where humanity stood guard, protecting not just themselves, but every species in the galaxy from the darkness beyond. The volunteers who had joined the collective consciousness became heroes. They could still live normal lives, still marry and have children, still pursue their dreams. But part of them was always aware, always standing watch in the space between dimensions, ready to defend against any devourer that dared approach. Ji-ho returned to diplomatic service, but everything was different now. The council meetings had a new tone, one of genuine cooperation instead of hidden manipulation. Other species looked at humanity with a mixture of gratitude and awe, understanding the sacrifice millions of humans had made for galactic security. Sumin continued her merchant operations, but she also served as a liaison between the physical world and the collective consciousness. She had a unique sensitivity to the quantum network, able to communicate with the Guardians more easily, and most. Hyun-woo and Mira were promoted to lead the new Galactic Defense Initiative, a joint military force that combined human and alien technologies to protect all borders. The silent war was silent no more, and humanity shared everything they had learned about fighting the DEVOURERS. Dr. Kyung won a dozen scientific awards for her work on collective consciousness technology. Other species began researching whether they could create similar networks, adding their own unique perspectives to the galaxy's defense. And Dr. Junho made a discovery that changed everything. The Devourers weren't mindless destroyers. They were the corrupted remnants of another precursor civilization, one that had merged with technology and lost their way. Deep in their quantum signatures, he found traces of consciousness, of beings that had once been alive before they became monsters. Perhaps someday they could be saved, returned to what they had been before the corruption took hold. It would take centuries of research, maybe millennia, but humanity had time now. The barrier would hold. The Guardians would stand watch. Ji-ho stood on Earth, looking up at the stars, and thought about all the humans who existed partially in those distant reaches of space. His friends, his colleagues, his fellow citizens, all of them touching the infinite while still remaining beautifully. Stubbornly human. The galaxy's map still ended at human space. But now everyone knew the reason. It ended there because humanity had chosen to be the wall between light and darkness. Not because they had to, but because when faced with an impossible choice, they had answered with the most human response possible. They stood together. They adapted. They fought. And they refused to let the darkness win. The precursors had left humanity a legacy, but humanity had transformed it into something new, something better. A defense that,